I want you to imagine two coworkers standing right here beside me. Same age, similar salaries, same company. But if I asked you which one was doing better financially, I think most people would choose the first one almost immediately. She drives a brand new SUV. She recently renovated her kitchen. She takes a couple of expensive vacations every year. She upgrades her phone whenever a new model comes out. If I showed you pictures of her life, you would probably say, okay, she's clearly doing well. Now look at the second coworker.
7-year-old Honda. Normal apartment, packed lunch more often than takeout. She still compares prices at the grocery store. She still thinks before spending $200 on something she doesn't really need. Nothing about her life screams wealth. And then Monday morning happens. Their company announces layoffs. Suddenly, the first coworker looks at all those things very differently. The SUV is still beautiful, but the payment is still due. The renovated kitchen still looks amazing, but the mortgage doesn't care that the paycheck may disappear. She realizes she has maybe 3 weeks of breathing room before things start getting uncomfortable. Now, look at the second coworker. She has months of expenses saved. No car payment, investments quietly growing in the background, and enough financial room to avoid accepting the first terrible job offer that appears. Same salaries, completely different lives the moment the ground moves underneath them. And this is what I want to talk about today, because getting richer does not always look like getting richer. Sometimes it looks incredibly boring.
Sometimes the evidence is not a new house or a luxury watch. Sometimes the evidence is that your car breaks and nothing terrible happens. Your paycheck arrives and you don't feel an urge to immediately spend it. Someone else buys something impressive and you genuinely don't care. A bad offer appears and you can say no. That kind of wealth is hard to see. And because it is hard to see, you can spend years building it while still wondering whether you are making any progress at all. So I want to show you 7 signs that your life may already be getting richer, even if you still don't feel rich. And the first one might be the easiest to miss. I call it the disaster-to-inconvenience shift. Let me give you a simple example. Your car needs an $800 repair. You see the bill, you're annoyed, maybe very annoyed, but you pay it. And then life continues. That doesn't sound impressive, but compare it with what the same repair might have meant a few years earlier. Maybe you didn't have $800.
So the repair went on a credit card. Now you have the repair bill plus interest. The next month becomes tighter. Then groceries go on the card. Then another expense appears. And suddenly, an $800 mechanical problem becomes a 6-month financial problem. That is what financial fragility looks like. One bad event creates another bad event. But when your finances become stronger, the chain starts breaking. The car still breaks. The dentist still surprises you with a bill. The washing machine still chooses the worst possible week to die. But the problem stays the size of the problem.
It doesn't spread into the rest of your life. And we know this matters because the Federal Reserve's most recent household survey found that 63% of adults said they could cover a $400 emergency using cash, savings, or a credit card they would pay off at the next statement. But 12% said they could not pay a $400 emergency expense by any method at all. And only 55% said they had enough rainy day savings to cover 3 months of expenses. The same Federal Reserve research found that major vehicle repairs or replacements were the most commonly reported unexpected major expense. So if your transmission fails and your reaction is now, well, this is going to be expensive, instead of, how are we going to survive this? I want you to recognize what happened. You didn't eliminate bad luck. You reduced its authority over your life. That is wealth. Not the Instagram version, the real version. And there's something almost funny about it. Nobody celebrates this. Nobody posts, my refrigerator broke today and financially nothing dramatic happened. But honestly, that might represent more progress than buying something impressive, because the first stage of wealth usually isn't luxury. It's resilience. It's becoming harder to knock over. Now, the second sign might sound backwards. Payday becomes less exciting. Let me explain. When money is tight or unstructured, payday can feel amazing. Yesterday, your account looked uncomfortable. Today, the paycheck lands. Suddenly, the number is much bigger, and your brain sees that bigger number before it sees all the jobs those dollars already have. Rent, insurance, groceries, utilities, annual bills, debt payments, savings, investments. Your brain just sees money, and for a few days, you feel richer than you actually are. Dinner out? Sure. $100 online order?
probably fine. A small upgrade? Why not? Then the bills start landing. The account drops, the month gets tighter, and suddenly the next paycheck becomes the rescue boat. But as your finances get stronger, payday changes. The money arrives, and most of it already has instructions. Some goes here, some goes there, some stays for future expenses, some gets invested, and only part of it is actually available for random spending. I call this the payday illusion disappearing. You stop confusing money in your account with money available to spend. Those are not the same thing. I could show you someone with $10,000 across several accounts who understands that only $500 is genuinely available for discretionary spending. And beside her, I could show you someone with $2,000 in checking who feels temporarily rich because none of the money has been mentally assigned. The second person may feel freer, the first person actually is. And research from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau found something interesting here. People who reported not saving were nearly 3 times as likely to report difficulty paying bills as people who said they did save.
And that pattern appeared across income groups. So this isn't only about making a giant salary. The habit of keeping part of what comes in matters. And at the national level, the Bureau of Economic Analysis estimated the U.S. personal saving rate at just 3% in May 2026. That number is not a rule for what you personally should save, but it does make one thing very clear. Keeping money is not automatic. Money comes in, life is incredibly good at finding places for it to go. And when you begin deciding where the money goes before your emotions decide for you, your entire relationship with payday changes. You stop asking, can I afford this? And you start asking, is this worth interrupting what my money is already doing? That is a much more powerful question. Because can I afford this usually looks at today. Is this worth it? Looks at your entire life. And once that shift starts happening, you may notice sign number 3. You become slower. Not slower at earning money, slower at making financial decisions. And I think this may be one of the most underrated benefits of having financial margin. Let's say I put 2 people in front of the same used car. The first person's car died yesterday.
She has almost no savings. She needs transportation to get to work on Monday. The second person also wants a newer car, but hers still runs. She has savings. She can wait. Now tell me, who has more negotiating power? The first person walks into the dealership thinking, I need a car. The second person walks in thinking, I might buy a car. Those are completely different positions. One person is under pressure. The other has options, and that difference can change the entire deal. I call this the patience dividend. When you have no financial margin, urgency controls you. You need the apartment now. You need the loan now. You need the job now. You need the deal now. And whenever you desperately need something, someone else's timetable starts controlling your decision. This matters because urgency is incredibly effective. Even the SEC's investor.gov website warns investors about pressure to act now and fear of missing out as common warning signs around investment fraud.
That principle applies far beyond investing. Whenever someone tells you, today only, last chance, you need to decide tonight. This deal disappears tomorrow, your thinking time is being compressed. But financial margin gives some of that time back. You can get 3 quotes. You can leave the dealership. You can sleep on the purchase. You can reject the contract. You can negotiate. You can wait. And sometimes the wealthiest thing you can say is simply, I'll think about it. Because having money doesn't only help you buy better things. Sometimes it helps you avoid buying the wrong thing. And if you are becoming harder to rush, you may be becoming richer. Now, the 4th sign is where a lot of people accidentally erase their own progress. Your income starts rising, but your lifestyle stops chasing it. Let me put 2 coworkers beside each other again. Both get an extra $500 a month in take-home pay. The first coworker feels richer immediately.
And she should. She worked hard. So she upgrades a few things. Nothing crazy. A nicer gym membership, more takeout, a couple of new subscriptions, maybe a newer car, maybe a slightly more expensive apartment when the lease ends. Every decision makes sense by itself. But 6 months later, the extra $500 is basically gone. Her income increased. Her lifestyle increased. Her financial breathing room barely changed. Now look at the second coworker. She gets the exact same $500. Maybe she spends an extra $150 and enjoys it. But the other $350 automatically goes toward investing or another long-term goal. At first, the first coworker probably looks richer. Newer car, more convenience, more visible evidence of the raise.
The second coworker looks almost exactly the same. But here's where time changes the picture.
If we use a purely hypothetical 7% annual return, investing $350 every month for 20 years would grow to roughly $182,000. That does not mean anyone is guaranteed a 7% return. Markets move up, markets move down. Investor.gov repeatedly emphasizes that investing involves risk. I'm using 7% simply to show you what a long period of compounding can do to an ordinary monthly amount. One person used the raise to permanently increase the cost of life. The other used part of the raise to build an asset. One upgraded immediately. One upgraded invisibly. I call the space between those two choices the lifestyle gap. It's the difference between what you could afford to spend and what you actually require yourself to spend. And the wider that gap becomes, the more freedom you eventually have. At first, keeping that gap can feel like you're missing out. You think, I'm earning more. Shouldn't my life look better? But your life may be getting better. You just upgraded the parts nobody can see. A larger emergency fund, lower debt, more investments, more months of runway, less dependence on every paycheck. And here's the part people underestimate.
Every recurring upgrade creates a requirement. The nicer apartment becomes rent you now have to support. The newer car becomes a payment you have to support. The extra subscriptions become bills you have to support. The more expensive lifestyle becomes your new normal. And normal is much harder to downgrade than it was to upgrade. So if your income has gone up over the last few years and your required lifestyle hasn't risen nearly as fast, that is a major sign of financial progress. Now, let me show you the fifth sign. This one is almost entirely psychological. Other people's spending starts losing power over you. At first, when you're trying to become more disciplined with money, comparison may still affect you constantly. You see someone buy a luxury SUV, and you think, okay, but I'm investing. You see someone take an expensive vacation, and you think, they're probably in debt. You see a giant house, and you remind yourself, real wealth is invisible. Notice what you're still doing. You're still competing. You're just trying to win a different competition. But eventually, something healthier happens.
You stop needing to know whether the other person is actually rich. Maybe she paid cash for the car. Maybe she financed the entire thing. Maybe she earns 5 times what you earn. Maybe she inherited money. Maybe she has millions invested. Maybe she doesn't. You don't know. And more importantly, you don't need to know. Her purchase is not information about your financial life. That is what I call comparison immunity. It doesn't mean you stop liking nice things. I can look at a beautiful house and say, that house is gorgeous. I can see an amazing car and think, I would love to drive that. I can look at someone's vacation photos and think, that looks incredible. But none of those thoughts automatically have to become, I need that too. I want you to separate 3 sentences. I like that. I can afford that. I want that enough to trade my money for it. Those are 3 different statements. And as your finances become stronger, you become better at separating them. You can admire the house without wanting the mortgage. You can admire the watch without buying the watch. You can appreciate someone else's vacation without turning it into evidence that your own life is inadequate. Appreciation without acquisition. That is a financial superpower because comparison almost never appears as a separate category on your bank statement. You will never open your credit card bill and see $12,000 spent this year trying to appear successful. It hides. It hides inside the car, the clothes, the neighborhood, the phone, the restaurants, the vacations, the slightly more expensive version of something you didn't care about until you saw somebody else owning it. So when you stop feeling the need to prove that you're doing well, your money gets permission to actually make you well. And then we reach sign number 6. This is where things can finally start getting fun. Your money begins doing meaningful work beside you. Early investing can feel incredibly underwhelming. Let's say you start investing $300 every month. After the first month, almost everything in the account came from you. After 6 months, still mostly you. After a year,
Again, most of the reason that account exists is because you kept transferring money into it. You made the sacrifice. You did the work. You chose not to spend it. And then the market moves a little, and you think, that's it? That is why early wealth building can feel so slow. The effort arrives immediately. The benefit of compounding takes time. Investor.gov describes compound growth as earning returns not only on the money you originally invest, but also on the growth that stays invested.
And the experience changes as the balance grows. If you have $2,000 invested and it rises 5%, that is $100. Nice. If you eventually have $100,000 invested and it rises the same 5%, that is $5,000. Same percentage, very different feeling. And yes, the account can fall 5% too. Markets do not move in a straight line. That is why we are talking about long periods of time rather than pretending every year is positive. But let me show you the bigger idea. If someone hypothetically invested $300 every month for 30 years and averaged 7% annually,
the ending value would be around $366,000. She personally contributed $108,000. In that mathematical illustration, roughly $258,000 came from growth. Again, that is not a promise. It is an example, but look at the relationship. At the beginning, she is building the machine. Later, the machine starts helping build itself. That is the transition I want you to notice. Early on, nearly all the progress comes from your behavior. You save, you invest, you say no, you keep going. Then eventually, if the balance becomes large enough, normal percentage movements start producing dollar amounts that once would have taken you months to save. You are no longer pushing the entire boulder uphill alone. Your money begins showing up beside you. And this is why financial progress can feel invisible right before it starts becoming obvious. For years, you may feel like you are doing everything right and barely moving. Then the base becomes large enough for the same percentages to create meaningful dollars. The beginning is mostly behavior. Later, behavior gets help from scale. And now we reach the seventh sign. I think this is the biggest one. Your definition of rich begins changing. When most of us first think about wealth, we think in nouns: house, car, salary,
Portfolio, vacation, watch, net worth. And there is nothing wrong with wanting any of those things. The problem is that the finish line keeps moving. Maybe you once thought, if I could make $80,000 a year, I would finally feel financially successful. Then you reach $80,000. And after a while, that becomes normal. So now maybe the number is $120,000. Then that becomes normal. Maybe you think, if I could just get $50,000 invested, I'd feel secure. You reach $50,000. Then you immediately start thinking about $100,000. You reach $100,000. Now you're looking at $250,000. The number changes. The feeling keeps escaping. And if your definition of wealth is always based on a number that can get bigger, you can become objectively richer for decades without ever allowing yourself to feel like you made progress. But eventually, wealth can start meaning something else.
Not just what you own, what you can do. Can you sleep normally when an unexpected bill arrives? Can you survive a month without income? 3 months? 6? Can you leave a miserable job without immediately panicking? Can you wait for the right opportunity instead of accepting the first paycheck available? Can you help someone you love without destabilizing your own life? Can you make a decision because it is right instead of because it is the only thing you can afford today? That is optionality. And optionality may be one of the clearest forms of wealth. The Federal Reserve's latest household research found that only 35% of non-retired adults believed their retirement savings plan was on track. So if your finances today are giving you more options than they gave you 5 years ago, don't dismiss that just because you still drive an ordinary car. Instead, I want you to ask yourself something. What can I do today that money would not have allowed me to do before? Maybe 5 years ago, a $1,000 bill would have gone straight onto a credit card. Now, you can pay it. Maybe missing one paycheck used to terrify you. Now, you have months of savings.
Maybe every raise used to disappear. Now, part of each raise stays yours. Maybe you once felt embarrassed driving an older car. Now you look at that paid-off car and see something completely different. No payment, no performance, no pressure, just transportation. Maybe someone else's expensive lifestyle used to make you feel behind. Now you can look at it and genuinely say, good for her, and then continue building your own life. Maybe your investments once moved almost entirely because you added money. Now there are periods where your money itself starts contributing meaningful growth. None of those things make a dramatic social media post. And that is exactly why they are easy to miss. Visible consumption gives you instant feedback. Buy the car, people notice. Renovate the kitchen, people notice. Take the trip, people see the photos. But move another $1,000 into your emergency fund? Nobody knows. Increase your retirement contribution? Nobody knows. Pay off a balance? Nobody knows.
Keep driving something that works instead of upgrading? Nobody even knows there was a decision. The world gives very little applause for invisible financial progress. But invisible financial progress has a strange habit. It accumulates. The emergency fund becomes 6 months. The debt disappears. The raise gets invested. The investment account gets larger. Your monthly obligations shrink. Your need to impress people fades. Your ability to wait expands. And then one day, something happens. Maybe it is a layoff. Maybe someone in your family gets sick. Maybe a job becomes unbearable. Maybe an opportunity appears in another city. And suddenly, everything you were quietly building becomes visible all at once. Not because you buy something, because you have a choice. Remember those 2 coworkers I showed you at the beginning? Before the layoff, the first one looked richer. The car told you that. The vacations told you that. The kitchen told you that.
The second coworker's wealth was almost impossible to see. It was hiding in the space between what she earned and what she needed. It was hiding inside the car payment she didn't have. It was sitting in savings. It was compounding inside investment accounts. It was living inside every bad offer she could afford to reject. Then life changed. And suddenly, the invisible difference became the entire story. That is the part of wealth I think we underestimate. Real wealth can spend years looking like nothing. It can look like an old car, a normal home, a boring automatic transfer, a purchase you didn't make, a raise nobody noticed, a problem that didn't turn into a crisis. So if you are waiting for some magical day when your financial life finally looks rich enough for you to believe you are making progress, I want you to look for different signs. Ask yourself, am I harder to scare than I used to be? Am I harder to rush? Am I harder to impress? Am I harder to trap? Does my future have more options than it used to? Because if the answer is yes, then even if your life looks almost exactly the same from the outside, something very important is happening underneath it. You are not standing still. You are building the part of wealth that usually comes before
Anyone else can see it. And for a long time, it can look like nothing is happening. Then, eventually, you realize almost everything has changed.